Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and a pleasure for me to welcome you inside the freshly renovated headquarters of the Collegium Intermarium University. Tonight, we'll be attending a lecture by Dr. Gregor Puppinck entitled "The Capture of the Human Rights Protection System by Large Private Foundations." You'll be given the opportunity to ask questions after the lecture, and the organizers told me to emphasize that during asking your questions, please speak clearly in the mic so that everyone can hear you in the room. Thanks in advance for that. Dr. Gregor Puppinck is the director of the European Center for Law and Justice. He is a member of the OSCE panel of experts on freedom of religion or belief and an expert at the Council of Europe. He takes part in the Committee of Experts on the reform of the European Court of Human Rights. In the last 20 years, he's been giving numerous lectures on the issues of human rights, international law, and constitutional law at law faculties of the universities of Mulhouse and Strasbourg. He is the author of a series of excellent books and articles published in several languages. Mr. Puppinck told me a couple of days ago that he visits Warsaw quite regularly, and that it's always a pleasure for him to be in Poland. Well, I believe I can speak for all of us gathered today by affirming that the pleasure is all ours. Without further ado, I give the floor to our honorable guest, Mr. Gregor Puppinck.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. I'm very pleased to be in Warsaw, as you said. I very much like your country because as you said, I was for a number of years in the past member of this panel of experts which gather here in Warsaw. So it's always a pleasure to be here. I'm also very pleased to visit your Collegium for the first time. I can see that you have not only, it's not anymore a project, I mean you have a nice accomplishment to have this place which is very nice and convenient. And I have to say that I strongly appreciate your initiative to establish such collegium and to propose international lectures, including the lecture on human rights in English, which propose teaching worldwide for foreign students as well with international professors. So I wish the best to the Collegium and to this program. I'm so pleased to see a student in the room, so it's a pleasure. Yes, what I want to tell you within the time we have, if I understand well, about an hour and a half ahead of us. I would like to tell you a bit about a phenomenon that we observed and described in the past years. I work in Strasbourg. I am the director of the European Center for Law and Justice, which is a non-governmental organization, legal organization, working with the European Court of Human Rights on many cases for more than 20 years, and with the United Nations as well as an NGO. We are doing advocacy, legal work, litigation, we support cases and so on. So we are really, I would say, an active organization involved maybe in more than 50 cases in the past from now before the European Court of Human Rights. So we have an important experience with international human rights institutions, and we could see how they function. So the purpose of the discussion today for me is to try to explore with you this very special society that is a society of international organizations. You may be acting at the national level or regional level, there is another level of politics and legal action, which is the international level, the supranational level of the United Nations, of the Council of Europe, of the European Commission. This level of power is, as you know, increasingly important. But sometimes it's difficult to understand how it works. Sometimes it's difficult to know who are the players at this level. And this level of power of institutions like the Council of Europe, for example, or the Human Rights Commissioner of the Council of Europe, or the Venice Commission, and so forth, enjoys a very important prestige. And the ordinary citizen doesn't understand a clue, anything about it. So many decisions are taken in Brussels, many decisions are taken in Luxembourg, in Strasbourg, in Geneva with the UN, or in New York. And the ordinary citizen and even many politicians don't understand. So one aspect of this system is the one that I would like to give you a glance at tonight, is the influence, the role of private foundations within this international system. As you know, the United Nations were founded after the Second World War, after the League of Nations between the two wars. You know that the Council of Europe was established as well after the Second World War by states as intergovernmental bodies, institutions. But so we see those institutions are putting together governments. And we see those institutions are, of course, highly prestigious and influential and important. One of the purposes of those institutions, when they were established after the Second World War, was to establish a system of mutual control between governments. The idea was, on one hand, that the states, the governments, would control each other mutually to avoid as much as possible crises, violation of treaties, violation of international law, violations of borders, I mean, like we have in your neighboring country of Ukraine, but also violation of individual human rights. So a system of mutual control between states based on treaties, sometimes with instruments like a court to overview, to look at the way the states respect or not their commitments, not overview but to control, and as well with the idea also of unifying the countries. So two aspects. One is mutual control based on principles and treaties. The other one is the idea of unifying countries, continents, such as Europe with the Council of Europe and the European Union. So what is important is that in that time, when it was established, politicians had some distance with the state model, which means they considered the state as being something that can be dangerous because it would be linked to nationalism or positivism. So the idea of promoting a supranational order, an international order, was also aimed at overpassing the model of the national state. Because the national state was considered as something dangerous because of the nationalism and also of the positivism that may occur in the national state. So international organizations were seen as something very good, a great achievement of our humanity, of course, as also an answer to limit the danger of the state, of the Leviathan. in this process, considering the state as dangerous, as almost evil, other actors emerged. And those other actors were private actors, international private actors. In the same time, we had international public actors emerging, such as the Council of Europe or United Nations or other international organizations. But we also had private international organizations that did appear. It's a bit like what we call at the national level the civil society. The idea that if you create a political level and order, then you need to have a society within this political order. But if you create an artificial political level, which is the international legal order and institutions, which is artificial. A state, a nation, Poland is not artificial. But in a large extent, we can say that the Council of Europe is a construction. So if you create, if you build a new level of politics and institutions, you don't have any people in it. In Poland, you have the institutions and you have the people. But with the UN or with the Council of Europe, you build the institution, but you don't have the people. You don't have the intermediary bodies. So, this lack of intermediary bodies was filled progressively with what we call today the civil society, the NGOs. So most of the NGOs were created, established, I mean they were all established within the context of this new institutional order. It is because there is the UN that there are plenty of NGOs. You create, you establish an NGO, international NGO, to act within international organizations. So it is a kind of civil society. It is still not a society by itself, but it is a kind of, as well, mixed construction of society. And those NGOs were considered as being something very, we could say, not. We saw them as being very positive because those NGOs that were established after the Second World War, when the UN were founded, were all, of course, willing to pursue a goal of common good, of universal common good. So this was the highest degree, I mean, of nobility in the action, you know, to pursue a goal of universal common good. For example, you know, International Organization for Education, or pursue the goal of, you know, ending, you know, issues with some disease. So those NGOs had a lot of prestige. Many of them, at the beginning, were pre-existing organizations, and often with religious roots, because Christian churches or other religions already existed previously at an international level. And so they were seen as something very, very positive. So this was the way the system was established at the beginning. It was a kind of construction, artificial construction. The state was considered as dangerous, the international organization being as a very prestigious and successful, and the NGOs as something neutral, something good, pursuing the universal common goods. What happened since is what I will describe, is what I will tell you now. Just to tell it into a few words, I can tell you that like any other places of power, power attracts power. So we built this international order, we gave it a lot of power, And of course, then starts politics. So the nice vision of the international organizations with pure benevolent actors is fake. It's not true anymore. I don't know if I think it has never been true. But today, obviously, it's not true. It is a place of politics. Nothing different with the national level. It is politics as usual. Yes, there are some actors at this level who have a real, pure, generous, universal vision of common good. There are some persons who really act for the common good, independently from national politics. There are. But it's not all the system like this. It is a place of fight between the states. You know in Poland the situation that you do have with the European Union and with the Council of Europe. It is a place of conflict. It is a place of politics. But what is interesting as well is that those institutions have been built, as I told you, in a large extent against the states in order to control, to limit the states, by the states but against it, to control, to limit. What we see is that now some private foundations very smartly, intelligently succeeded in getting into the system, which is not forbidden at all. But because the NGOs are seen as so positively, nobody saw that there may be a problem or a danger with NGOs' action within the international system. The system was built to limit the states, not to limit or control the NGOs, of course. But now what we can observe is that within the system, some very large foundations with budgets of billions of euros or dollars invest into the system in order to promote their vision of the world, their agenda. And they use, I mean, of course, their wealth at many levels in order to participate, to support, to help, to contribute. But you know, what does it mean to help, to support, to contribute if you become, you know, the main financer? You know, the largest, the biggest example that is known is about the World Health Organization. And it became, you know, almost a scandal during the pandemic when it was revealed that, you know, the second largest founder of the World Health Organization is the Gates Foundation. And that the Gates Foundation takes part, is involved not only into financing, but also, of course, into the policy of the organization. So this is something that we have, my center, the European Center for Law and Justice, we have studied with two reports. One report exposes and studies the role of some of those foundations and NGOs within the system of the European Court of Human Rights. Because it is a system that I know the best, the more, and I was witness of this increasing influence within the system of the Court of Strasbourg, and we've been looking to ways of influence of large foundations. And I would say that Poland is a very important country in this regard, because you do have in Poland one of those foundations that has very strong connections, strong links with the European Court of Human Rights, and we may speak about it. So the name of the report was the NGOs and the Judges of the ECHR, 2009-2019. You can find it online. There is even a Polish version that do exist. You may find. Then we did a second report on the financing of the UN special procedures. The special procedures is a mechanism of protection of human rights established by the United Nations with the Human Rights Council. And through this report, we have been looking more at the role of the large foundations through the financing. And we could, with those two reports, we could start to draw a map, I would say, to describe the various ways those foundations act within international organizations. Of course, it's not always legal, but sometimes it is in violation of the rules of those institutions. And sometimes it can go very close to corruption. The word was used by former UN special rapporteurs when it comes to giving money directly from one foundation to one UN expert. So, I will first read you some 2 pages, and then I will continue just speaking because we don't have maybe enough time to read everything, and it's maybe more easy to just speak and discuss, and then we have some time for questions. So I will read you, in fact, the introduction of my conference, and then I will continue just describing it. In the age of globalization, international institutions are assuming increasing responsibility and wielding considerable power. Decision-making centers are moving away from the people and their historical capital, cities, to a few new capitals of global governance, be they financial or political, notably in New York and Geneva. By moving, power changes in nature. It wants to be more rational and global, and therefore detach itself from the expression of the supposedly irrational will of particular peoples, as well as from the old distinction between public and private actors, in favor of a new distinction between local and global actors. While small states are local actors, without great means, some foundations and private companies are among the global actors. Some of these private global actors have an explicit political purpose. There are large foundations and NGOs that have not only considerable resources, but also high-level expertise, and, more importantly, they have generally a very precise and global worldview. These qualities, to having a worldview, resources, and expertise, make these private actors very effective instruments of social changes, acting in the political and social field with much more agility than states, without their administrative and democratic ponderousness weight. As a result, a few private actors have acquired far more financial and political power than many states. The attitude of governments towards these private actors varies according to whether they share or not the same worldview. International organizations such as the UN or Council of Europe generally share the same liberal and global vision of the future of humanity and strive to achieve it. International organizations, as well as large foundations and NGOs, are similar and appear to be complementary. Indeed, these NGOs, enable disconnected international organization action to be grounded, to make it timely and effective, and to act independently of government. So there is really a complementary between NGOs, foundations, and international public organizations. In return, international organizations translate the message of NGOs and foundations into political and institutional terms. Basically, they are supposed to share the same global vision of the world, to be committed to the common good of humanity, and to be detached from national political considerations. This common good of humanity would be more easily accessible to those international organizations, public and private, in that they would not think in terms of selfish national interest, but in the universal language of reason. This language of reason also appears to be that of international law, and in particular of human rights. This complementary relationship leads to a constructive dynamic whereby international organizations and private NGOs inform and influence each other. However, the blurring of the boundary between public and private actors and the depth of the relationship between those actors allow global private actors to exert a significant influence on international organizations and through them on the world at large. The difficulty is to determine the acceptable limit of this private influence on public institutions. Is there only one step? As there is only one step from complementarity to dependence, which can be crossed in particular by the funding of international organizations, by foundations and private NGOs. This funding is a result of another complementarity between those organizations. International organizations have power, political power, but they want and they need more financial means, while foundations have the financial means, but they want more political power. This funding is seen as acceptable and beneficial by international organizations in that it allows them to work towards a common worldview. However, such funding is problematic because it further blurs the difference between public and private global actors and has the effect of confusing their political and financial powers. Thus, international organizations can become dependent on private foundations. This confusion is an aspect of the global current governance. The boundary between public and private actors can also be blurred at the human level by the recruitment of staff from foundations and NGOs as experts and international judges. This blurring of the lines can lead to multiple situations, problematic situations, such as conflicts of interest. This phenomenon, whereby a private actor exerts a significant influence or within a public institution, has been called capture and privatization in social science. The two reports that I mentioned previously from the European Centre for Law and Justice outline this phenomenon within the European Court of Human Rights and within the system of the special procedure of the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. The report of the European Centre for Law and Justice on the European Court of Human Rights exposed the extent of the relationship between some foundations and NGOs and judges. Whereas the report on the UN system presents the financing and the various ways foundations influence United Nations experts, independent experts. The report revealed the extent and opacity of support and funding for experts outside the UN system. It also exposed methods used by some private foundations to influence these experts. Some of these experts who were interviewed by us, as I said before, use the word corruption to describe the phenomenon of private financing by foundations of independent UN experts. So those two reports analyze central components of the contemporary system of global governance through human rights. They attracted a lot of attention. It could be and should be extended to other institutions. So now I will present you in a few words some of the findings of those two reports, and through that way I will show you what are the tools of the ways foundation can have an influence within a public institution. So there are various ways. We have identified several ways. First way is through the financing of the funding and the functioning of international organizations. Maybe first I should tell you who are those foundations. Who are those foundations I'm speaking about? I mean, it seems sometimes obvious, but who are they? We could find out, and it's very well known, that there are a group of maybe 10 foundations that finance the human rights system in addition to the states. Normally, the system of the human rights system is financed by the governments, but they accept additional money. They accept additional money from some governments, and in this regard, Nordic countries of Europe are those who pay the more, like the Netherlands or Sweden, and they accept money from foundations. So who are those foundations? They are mainly American, Northern American foundations, like the Ford Foundation, who was established by Henry Ford, or the Rockefeller Foundation. In the past, we used to have also the Carnegie Foundation in New York, or we have the today very well known the Open Society Foundation of George Soros, who is very active in the field of human rights, or the Gates Foundation of Bill and Melinda Gates. So we have Packard Bell Foundation. There is a small team of foundations. They are almost all from United States, New York. And this team of foundation is the one who really is involved in this phenomenon at different levels. We must say that those who are the most involved in the field of human rights are the Open Society Foundation of Mr. Soros and the Ford Foundation. To some extent, Rockefeller as well. The foundations, it seems, share the work. Gates Foundation mainly focus on health issue, whereas the with Buffett, whereas the Open Society Foundations mainly focus on human rights, whereas the Rockefeller Foundations was more involved for a long time on the issues of population control, demography, population control. So you can find specialization. I mean, they don't do the same, all of them. They specialize, mainly. And in the field of human rights, the two main actors are the Ford and the Open Society Foundations. So this is what I speak about them. So they participate in the system, I said, through the financing of the funding and of the functioning of international bodies. Then, second way of participation, through the appointment of judges and experts within these institutions. So through marching through the institution, they provide for judges to the European Court of Human Rights. They provide for experts to the United Nations. And in this regard, we can say that the Open Society Foundations is very successful in doing so. The Open Society Foundation, we could demonstrate it, succeeded to have a lot of several persons of its staff, 12 persons at least, who were on the payroll or who were working with the Open Society Foundation, were appointed judges at the European Court of Human Rights in the past 10 years. So 12. Former staff, former members of the board of the Open Society, or former professors of universities founded and financed by the Open Society. So people who are really more than working with, who are really involved in, sometimes on the payroll, often on the payroll. So getting people appointed as judges, but the same is true, and I will maybe come back to it, for the UN experts, getting people from your foundations or your network of NGOs becoming an official expert of the United Nations. We could look through the list of the UN independent experts, and we could see that a large proportion of them are coming from those foundations and NGOs. Few, I mean just a handful of foundations and NGOs. Always the same. So this is something we could observe, and it is very, very clear. Then we could also identify another way of influence. Through the recruitment, this is something different, the recruitment of experts of international bodies. So it's one thing to get one on your staff, one on your colleague, becoming a judge in Strasbourg or becoming a UN expert on health or whatever. But if it's not the case, I mean, you may try to capture, you may try to extend your influence through proposing a job. So normally the UN experts, who are the highest experts at the United Nations on specific issues, who provide reports, analyses, they have a high influence, they have a high prestige, but those persons are working for free normally. They are supposed to be independent from every state, every institution, working for free, just getting some support from the UN to do their work. So they are important persons, experts on some conflicts. They are the people that governments listen to. And so what we could see is also that some of those experts, once they are appointed expert, by chance, they get a position into an association, an NGO, a center that is a private center that is connected to the topic of their mandate at the UN. And they get paid for this position. For example, Melissa Upreti, she is a very strong feminist, pro-abortion, very strong, militant from the US, working in the US. And she got appointed on a UN Committee of Experts on Women's Rights. And at the same time, she got a job into one of the lobbies for abortion. And this lobby for abortion, feminist center, ultra-feminist center, itself receives funds from the Open Society and others. So you have the foundations who will give money to a center or to an NGO, which will hire a UN expert. And the UN expert will be pleased to have his place to work and to make a living, and also to be able to use the means offered by the place he is received. And so this is through the way of employing an expert, providing for a job, providing for staff, providing for finances. But behind, if you do the research, and we've done it, who is financing the center, who is hiring the expert? You still go and find the same foundations. Ford, Open Society, and some others. So it's another way to do so. Interestingly, I spoke of Mrs. Dupretti, but she is working within this lobby group because she is in charge of global advocacy, which means global lobbying. So for her private employer, she is in charge of doing lobbying at the UN, we could say, and also places, global advocacy. And in the meantime, she is herself a UN expert on the same issue of women's rights. And this center received money from the Open Society Foundation in order, I quote, to influence UN experts. This was in the Open Society financial figures, in order to influence UN experts. So this Women's Center White received money from the Open Society in order to influence UN experts and hired UN experts who is in charge of influence global advocacy. So you see the mix. But the most funny thing in this story is that the lady who was in charge of the women's program of the Open Society, who gave $100,000 for this purpose, herself, she then became a UN expert. Okay, so you see how it works. And of course, this lady, she was upset by our report. So, because she was attacking me quite strongly, telling me that I may have problems if I publish it and so on, as it was. So I had to take out her name, some regard, some extent. So, I mean, so I just want to give you a short vision. Then another way of influencing, of course, is through the funding of experts. And we have been looking to the finances of the UN experts, and we could find, as I told you, that those foundations, Open Society Foundation, Ford Foundation, finance directly UN experts, some UN experts, a number of UN experts, without any control of the United Nations system. 37 out of 121 experts have received 134 direct financial payments outside of any UN control, for an amount of about 10 or $11 million. One expert himself reported having received $2 million. Some others have received 500,000, and so forth. And this money is given officially by those foundations to help the expert. They say, we want to help you in your mandate. We like what you do. You are important. We want to promote your mandate, your work. So can we please help you? Can we give you $200,000? But as some experts have told us, often when they propose the money, they say, by the way, we would appreciate if you look to this issue. We would give you the money if you do a report on such issue. which means that funding the experts have an influence on the agenda of the expert. If an expert can receive $100,000 or 200 for working on one specific aspect of his mandate. For example, in a short period of time, several UN experts have published reports on gender. The experts on domestic slavery published a report on gender and domestic workers, and you had other topics. And when you dig in, you find, in fact, that those reports were financed by almost the same foundations. So if you are a foundation, if you want a topic like the gender to become mainstream, you may go to a number of UN experts and tell them, listen, I would like to support your work. If you accept to do a report on such topic, I would give you the means to do a good report. I will also organize for you conferences, seminars, trips, press conferences, books, publications, media. I mean, if you have behind you the Ford Foundation or the Open Society Foundation as a UN expert, I mean, you have an army behind you. So you get support, but sometimes you get more than support. You get influence. And this is where some experts speak about corruption, because they are supposed to be independent. And this can explain why, in the meantime, some topics arrive from different places. This practice of accepting funding out of UN system control is contrary to the rules of the UN. However, they do accept it, and the UN let it do, because the UN does not spend money for the experts, much. So in some extent, they are happy. The Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights is happy with the system, so that it doesn't pay too much. But the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights of the United Nations also receives money from those foundations, especially from Microsoft, for example, who gave $5 million to the Office of the High Commissioner in an agreement that the office refused to publish. So this creates some difficulties, of course. I didn't mention too much about the European Court of Human Rights. I will tell you more in the remaining time that we have in the next 10 minutes. What we have observed at the European Court of Human Rights is a bit different. There is no real issue of funding, although the Open Society Foundations and the Microsoft do have in the past founded the Council of Europe, not so importantly, but they did participate in it. What is more important is, as the European Court of Human Rights, the fact that you have a number of judges that are former staff or directors of NGOs and foundations that are active before the court. There is no problem with having, of course, NGOs. I have nothing against NGOs, of course, obviously. But what we can observe is that some NGOs, like my NGO, are very active with the European Court of Human Rights. That's fine. That's fine. The problem may start when someone who has been lobbying, doing strategic litigation for years with the European Court of Human Rights, then becomes a judge. And the problem may increase if you have not one, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 judges coming from the same organization or the same network. We've been looking to the 100 judges who were judges between 2009 and 2019, and 22 of them are coming from foundations and NGOs that are active before the court. 12 of them are coming from the network of the Open Society Foundation. And the 10 others are coming from NGOs that are also financed by the Open Society Foundations. Not fully financed, but receive. So, I mean, it is a network. It is a network of similar NGOs sharing common financial sources and sharing some visions. Until then, I mean, there is nothing illegal in this situation. That it just shows that there is a connection, a personal connection. But the problem starts when you look at the way those judges, once they become judge, for example, you had the head of the, one of the board members of the Open Society in New York, who is a Bulgarian lawyer. He was also the founder of the Helsinki Committee of Bulgaria. I know you have in Poland a Helsinki Committee for Human Rights of Warsaw. Was the equivalent in Bulgaria, who is also financed by the Open Society. And this man, who has been active before the Court of Strasbourg for years, he has been defending the Pussy Riot against Russia, for example, and he became judge one day. So he moved from the Open Society office in New York to the court in Strasbourg. And the problem starts when this kind of person, as a judge, receive applications introduced by their own organization, by their former colleagues. Imagine this man has been the director and the founder of an NGO in Bulgaria, financed by the Open Society anyway. But more importantly, then he ruled on cases introduced by his former NGO, the one that he himself founded, established, and was a director of. So we've been looking to the cases where we can see that the judges are confronted with cases introduced or supported as amicus curiae by their former foundation or NGO. And we could find 88 cases of such conflicts of interest between 2009 and 2019. So 88 times we could find a judge this ruling on a case introduced or supported as third party by his former NGO. It can be Human Rights Watch, it can be the Helsinki Committee for Human Rights of Warsaw, quite frequent. It can be other Commission Internationale des Juristes. I mean, there are a short number, there are seven organizations and 88 cases of such conflicts of interest. So you can see what can be the problems caused by this deep relationship between foundations, NGOs, and international organizations. And it's just an aspect of it, one aspect of it, because those relationships are not limited to the judges. I mean, we say within the staff, it is the same happens. You have, for example, Polish staff of the European Court of Human Rights, who, of course, has a relationship with Polish NGOs who introduce cases. And you have, because this is legitimate, you have former ECH, European Court of Human Rights staff, working for NGOs after a while. So the human relations do exist strongly. And so this can, of course, become problematic if it's become too frequent. And 88 times in 10 years is huge. We have continued to do the research more recently on the last 3 years, 2020 to 2023, to December 22, I would say. And we are going to publish very soon this new report that looks at the new cases of conflicts of interest and the policy of the judges in terms of recusal and some other problems that we have observed. So what I wanted to share with you tonight is this vision of the complexity of the role of private foundations, NGOs. I would just invite you not to be naive, but to look a bit behind the scene when it comes to international organizations, United Nations, because it's a complex reality. And what you see sometimes is just a part of it. When you see a report, as I said, from such or such UN expert, it is not written anywhere that this report was financed by such or such foundation and organized with its support and so on. So you may be naive looking at it, and you may believe that it's really just as it is. No, it's more complex. And so, so this is a process, we can say, of progressive capture of the European and international system of protection of human rights by some private actors, some foundations, who spend hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars, to invest through those institutions, because those institutions have a huge power internationally. And it's a good place to invest in if you want yourself to exercise a more global power. Thank you.
Okay. So, my name is Paweł Łącki. I'm a lawyer. I'm a lecturer at the largest private university in Poland, SWPS. And I thank you very much for your interesting lecture, but I would like to press you a bit on your thesis, but of course in a friendly way. So I would like to limit my question to the European Court of Human Rights and to the problems you described regarding the charges. I think that there are huge problems with the jurisprudence of European Court of Human Rights. But is it not the case that you slightly exaggerate the institutional problems? So you mention cases of several judges associated with left foundations and NGOs. 22 for 100 in 10 years. And do you really think that this has a real impact on the jurisprudence of the European Court of Human Rights? Because I think from the legal perspective, I'm a lawyer, so I would like to limit my question to the legal perspective. So I think that the huge problems with the court is the legal methodology, which was developed in 70s, exactly in 70s, 80s. So the concept, the doctrines of living instrument, consensus method, dynamic interpretations, proportionality. We can, extend the list. But these are the problems. So, do you really think if there were other judges than these 22 judges, it will change anything in the larger picture of jurisprudence of the court? I mean, John Finnis said that the original sin of the court was Golder case. This was and then it went, you know, and the real problem with the court, I think, is this arbitrary legal methodology. So I'm afraid that, you know, if we, and you quoted, you mentioned 88 cases. The case load in the court is enormous. Yes, there are, I don't remember how many cases are decided, but, you know, 30,000 cases a year, yeah, roughly, or...
Okay, I will answer.
Yeah, okay.
So out of the 88 cases that I mentioned, there are 34 grand chamber cases. So it's not any case. The foundations, the large NGOs, don't go into meaningless cases. They invest in important cases. And so 34 grand chamber. So what you said, I mean, is another problem. It's not exclusive at all. There are a number of problems with the court, you may say, but what you address is a matter of opinion. What I presented is a matter of rules. And therefore, I think it's important to address this issue within the court because it's a matter of rules. I, on purpose, refuse to taint this analysis through or with criticism on the content or direction of the case law. I don't need to discuss the content of the case law. I've done it previously in other books. So I think those questions, your questions, are purely legitimate, of course, important, but not exclusive. And I don't want to affirm, I cannot want to take the judicial risk to affirm that such judge, you know, was partial and ruled in one direction because of. I cannot affirm that. What I can affirm is that there are many, many cases of conflicts of interest that the judges should have recused themselves. It's breaches of judicial ethics, deontology. And yes, in my opinion, some decisions can be explained by, maybe not explained by bias, but some decisions could be foreseen in advance, once you know who will be on the... Because the problem is when you have someone who becomes a judge, but he spends the last 20 years in his life advocating for something. For example, when you have a judge who comes from the Open Society. The Open Society supports and finances legalization of prostitution or drugs, support or finance legalization of euthanasia. So once you have a former member of the board of a branch of the Open Society who is in front of a case dealing with one of those topics, I mean, you can presume that he will not be against, I mean, the opinion that he has been defending for 20 years. So this is what we can say. And of course, the fact is that those large foundations and NGOs, as I say, they are very liberal and very globalist. So these do have an influence on the case law at the end. If you have a number of persons coming from those, because those, if you have been a militant, if you have done strategic litigation for years, you do have this vision of using human rights as a living instrument, extending the scope of human rights, and so forth. It's very different from a judge. A judge would more apply the rules. He would not have the attitude of a militant who would try to extend the rules. So I think the fact that there is a lot of militancy within the court case law can also be explained by the fact that there is a culture of, there is the NGO culture. There is an NGO-lisation. It's like if the court becomes and acts like an NGO, more and more. I think we can say that. We can say it acts more like an NGO than like a strict court jurisdiction. And it is a question of culture. That's what I will answer to your question.
Thank you very much for your lecture. I was late, so I apologize for that, but what I've heard is quite inspiring. I mean, I come from the area where transparency is very important in finance, in banking. We've got this anti-money laundering laws which force many institutions to go to, which is called ultimate beneficial holder. And I see certain analogy between what you said and what is standard in other areas. If you want to ensure fair judgment, fair court proceedings, you need to know in a transparent way who is behind the scenes, what you said. So I believe that your remarks concerning the potential bias are quite important, because as a citizen of European Union, of Poland, I would like to know what is the background of those who are taking important decisions in the Court of Human Rights, to understand what is their journey, their career path, because this can create bias, and as citizens we should know that. This is the first point. So I understand from what you said that transparency is one of the vehicles to ensure that this objectivity and fair judgment is ensured. That's one thing. The second thing, it should sound alarming for our civil society that many NGOs operate in a quite complex and unclear way. I mean, the system of connections, both political, social, and other, which are around these NGOs, and the money they've got, there should be really a call for greater prudence and for sure greater transparency and clarification. What is the source of funding? What is ultimate beneficial holder? Who voted for many years or advocated for many years for what causes? Because this is what we need as a society, because if we see certain strange judgment of the Court of Human Rights, we can ask questions, who are these judges, right? What is the background? Are they objective? So I think this combination of public and private NGOs, which are funded by private money, and public institutions who should be really independent and act in favor of the common good, is somewhat nowadays convoluted. I mean, this connection is somewhat doesn't work. We see too much influence, both at World Economic Forum and in the UN, in WHO and other global organizations, of these not transparent private sector entities which do not tell us much about themselves, and they have huge impact, and we don't even know exactly, only thanks to such more in-depth research you've done, how they really operate behind the scenes. And that's very appalling and very, I would say, frightening for this civil society. So could you give us a few comments? How can we overcome, as a normal people, citizens, this kind of phenomenon? And what shall we ask our politicians to do with that?
Okay. So, I will give you, thank you for your remarks. I will, what to do? First, I think those institutions have a lot of prestige, and they are important, but they must be accountable. One of the problems, one of the reasons I think of the problems of the Court of Strasbourg is that there is no other court to look at it. Every court normally has another court that will scrutinize. But, you know, it is absolutely sure that the Court of Strasbourg would be sanctioned, sanctioned by any other court for the conflicts of interest. I mean, what the court did itself, the court would sanction it if it happened in a national state court. The Court of Strasbourg would not accept in a national court what happened within its own walls with those conflicts of interest. But there is no superior court or authority to control what's going on within the European Court of Human Rights, because it is the ultimate court. So nobody controls. And it is a quite specific institution. It's not really it's not at all an ordinary court. So it took some bad habits, I can say. No external control, bad habits. The governments are reluctant to exercise control because they don't want to interfere within the court, which is legitimate. And the NGOs, normally who is the civil society who should do this work of control, I mean, the largest one, I can say, I mentioned, gain benefits from this situation. So nobody really does the control. And this is what happens. So what I recommend you is for your national governments, politicians, members of parliament, to do more control, to look at it. I will give you just one simple example. Poland is under scrutiny by the European Court of Human Rights because of its law because of the Supreme Court decision on abortion. The Court of Strasbourg will decide on abortion cases against Poland soon. I've been looking to the functioning of the court, but there is one thing: there is no transparency. It is who is the staff of the court. We just know the names of the judges, and we know the name of about 12 responsible of the staff. But there are hundreds of lawyers working in the court, and those lawyers are the ones who handle the case. Within the Court of Strasbourg, you have Polish lawyers. They handle the Polish cases. They are the ones who do the preparatory work, who draft the judgments. They are the ones who do the work. And the judge decides. But we don't know who are those lawyers working at the court. It's not public information. I could find some names looking through LinkedIn or looking through, and I could find some names. And what I could find, for example, is one of the Polish lawyer working at the Court of Strasbourg on Polish cases. She was one of the heads of the pro-abortion demonstrations in Warsaw. She was member of Revolutionary Feminist Brigade of Warsaw. She was an active pro-abortion activist, and during the demonstrations, and then she became hired at the European Court of Human Rights to work on Polish cases. So maybe she has been working on abortion cases against Poland. We don't know because it's not public. We don't know who is working on the case. And I could find two other persons who, just to finish with this lady, we published her name in an article and she stopped working at the court. She has been hired by Abortion Without Borders or something like this for a while, and now she's back at the Council of Europe and she has even a higher position in Strasbourg. Anyway, and we could find as well other Polish members of the registry who published, on their Facebook, the symbols of the abortion fight. This thing like this, some symbols of pro-abortion symbols to show that they were supporting. And this is a problem because they are the ones who are in charge of the Polish cases. So for you, what you could do, for you, member of parliament, they should ask for more transparency, because there cannot be justice without transparency. And this is a simple demand. Please tell us who is the staff of the Court of Strasbourg so that we can check, we can look. Because the list of the staff of the Court of Luxembourg, of the European Court of Justice, for example, is public. The list of the staff of the registry of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights is public, so forth, for the Supreme Court of the United States. It's a matter of transparency. And I can also tell you that the Polish staff between the European Court of Human Rights and the Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights of Warsaw, who is introducing the cases on abortion, you have exchanges of staff, which means the lady who did the application against Poland on abortion for the Helsinki Committee, she's herself a former employee of the European Court, which is legitimate. But just to tell you that there are so deep connections. And it's not illegal. I don't pretend it's illegal. I just say it does exist. And so what is problematic, obviously, is when registry staff publish opinions on issues that are pending before the court. If you are working in a court, you shall stay silent on politics, but they don't. So this is an example of, there are so many things to do, but this is an example of, and if if Poland is sanctioned by the European Court of Human Rights on abortion, I would recommend you to try to find who was working the case, because this is the problems of, as I described, this is one of the examples of the problems resulting from this situation.
Hi, Professor. My background is also in finance, and I would like to ask two quick questions. It is clear to me how the NGOs are putting staff on the United Nations organizations, with funding both sides. How are the judges being placed by NGOs in the European Court of Human Rights? That's one thing. And the other thing is, you said that the NGOs are outlaying huge amounts of money as an investment. Okay, what is their return on the investment?
Okay, so we see your finance background. So first question, I'll give you an example. Albania. Albania is a very small country, highly corrupted, maybe the most corrupted country in Europe. It's also the place where the Open Society Foundation spends the most money, at least in proportion. Over 100, I think something like $120 million in the last decade. It's quite a lot for a small country, a very small country. like a region. And so the Open Society Foundation spent a lot of money in this very small country, which is the Council of Europe. One country is one vote. One country is one judge. So the judge of Albania has the same weight as the judge of Poland or France. So a huge amount of huge support, financial investment in this country. As a result, the Open Society could take part into many political process in the country. It supported the opposition, and then the opposition became the government. Then, when the government had to appoint new judges, they have to propose a list of 3 names. And one of the 3 is picked by the Council of Europe Assembly. Among the 3 names, 2 were Open Society. So it's not so difficult then to get one elected, 2 out of 3. And the one who was elected was the one who was more deeply involved with the Open Society. Then, and this is more on your side, you can look to the financial interests of the funds of Mr. Soros in Albania. Because maybe, I don't know, but I've read some press articles in Albanian, so maybe there are mistakes, errors in the translation, we know with DeepL. But what I could see is that there are investments in energies. So, I mean, and obviously, you can look on the internet, they are very friends. I mean, the Prime Minister of Albania, Mr. Rama, is very closely friend with the boss, Mr. Soros' father, and son. So I think I've answered to both questions.
Right. Thank you very much for this very interesting open lecture, and thank you for spending time here. Thank you for all questions and your answers. So thank you very much, and I hope you had a great time here today. So if you have any other things that you want to discuss with Professor Puppinck, I think he has still some time to speak about. Thank you.
Merci.